Hi, my name is Ian McKenna, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Ibogaine. So, Ibogaine, as you might already know if you're watching this feed, is pretty much just the miracle solution to opioid dependency. It truly is that dramatic of a solution to an opioid addiction. A single dose of Ibogaine can interrupt a long time opioid dependency completely with remove all withdrawal symptoms whatsoever. And so that's freaking a miracle. Okay, Ibogaine is a miracle. You give someone a dose of Ibogaine, they're no longer addicted to heroin. Okay, it is that simple. It's also not that simple, and the reason it's not that simple is that medical screening is necessary, medical supervision is necessary, with proper support during that to keep an eye on your heart, for example. Um, the heart thing is, if you know what to look for, if you're a doctor, there's never going to be a problem. For example, Dr. Camlet has done, if I remember correctly, 2,000 successful Ibogaine treatments. This is the nuanced part. You don't want to just go take it in your on your couch and then think that's going to solve the problem. This is not like mushrooms or acid. It's a very profound experience in that sense, and it can be a little rough on the body. So it's important to get just some basic medical screening beforehand and medical supervision during that, and to have a post care period. And so as a result, it only makes sense to do this in a clinical setting. Unfortunately, if it were that simple and we could just give it like a dose of mushrooms or something, but Ibogaine is different. Ibogaine overnight eliminates withdrawal symptoms. There's other issues, for example, fentanyl. Fentanyl, you need to switch to a shorter acting opioid for a period of time before doing a detox. Or you got to detox from fentanyl to an opioid, a shorter acting opioid, in order for Ibogaine to be successful. But that's fine. That's a 2 week process. So this is all, there's so much. And how Ibogaine works in the brain also is, there are some people that are way smarter than me and know a lot more about biochemistry than me that are still amazed and kind of baffled about the whole thing. Um, it's been explained to me multiple times what we know so far about it has to do with gene expression, it has to do with the pons, it has to do with all of this enzymatic pathway stuff that I don't understand. I'm a chemist. I do sort of alkaloid stuff with plants. And biochemistry is way complex and sort of over my head, and I defer to others more knowledgeable. But we do know that it works if it's used respectfully and responsibly. And so that brings us to the next issue with Ibogaine, and it's sourcing. So Ibogaine currently is sourced from a plant called Tabernacle Iboga, which is the sacred plant of the Bwiti tribes of West Central Africa, Gabon, and Cameroon. Tabernacle Iboga is a really kind of rare shrub that only grows in this one place, and it takes 8 years for it to mature. And in order to harvest the root bark, it kills the plant. This is the sacred visionary plant of these tribes. So if we try to source all the ibogaine from the Tabernacle Iboga, it puts pressure on these indigenous populations of these areas, and it forces them into this economic trap where we buy all of their sacred plant and use it to help people kick opiates and stuff. All right, well, I mean, it's a reasonable goal to help people kick opiates, but here's the thing: that substance, Tabernacle Iboga, the shrub, it contains, if I remember correctly, 8 alkaloids. And it's a very psychedelic and comprehensive, visionary, spiritual experience. It's not really for everybody. And so it's like, you get someone who's like addicted to heroin and Vicodin and stuff, and they come and they get a profoundly religious experience that resets their entire life. That's actually great. That's good for them. I mean, but is it, I don't know if it's necessarily ethical to take it from the Tabernacle Iboga, from the Bwiti tribes, to give it to people that are trying to kick heroin, Westerners who are trying to kick heroin. Now, I mean, that is if there's no other solution, and there is another solution. So bring in, enter the work of Dr. Chris Jenks. So Dr. Jenks discovered that there's a plant called Voacanga africana, which contains an alkaloid called voacangine. Voacangine is very similar to ibogaine, and you can. It turns out Voacanga africana is a little more sustainable. It's already used in trade and industry, so there's sources of it. So if you extract Voacangine from Voacanga africana, that is a viable precursor to ibogaine. So my work as a chemist, what I'm interested in doing is I'm taking the work of Dr. Chris Jenks, which is very pioneering, incredible work, and I'm applying my experience with other sorts of plants, alkaloid extractions. I worked with kratom for a while, ironically enough. I worked with kratom because I believed in kratom, and then as I saw the abuse potential, I instantly cut ties with kratom. But nonetheless, so I'm going to take that knowledge of how to process sort of volumes of. See, this is the thing. A chemist, the way chemists looks at things in terms of is this. I don't know if you can see that. Molecules, charges, benzene rings and stuff like that, and pH and charge. And molecules are like little magnets, the way they move around each other in solution. And so, for example, with another extraction that I work with, and I know I'm running long here, I'm about 5 minutes. I've worked a lot with Harmala, Peganum Harmala extraction, and that is an alkaloid where you've got the seed material, these seeds, and you want to get the alkaloid out of the seeds. So the first steps are processing this plant material. It's not really chemistry. I mean, it is. It's the first steps of chemistry. So what people did for a long time was grind up the seeds and then tediously filter it all and extract it with vinegar. What we found out, excuse me, is that something like 90+% of the alkaloids are in the hull of the seeds. And it turns out you can just boil the seeds as they are and you get pretty much negligible loss, if any, in your yield, and it's 10 times easier. So for a long time, people ground up the seeds. And that's how chemists would think of it. It's like grind up the seeds, increase the surface area as much as possible. But if you get to know the plant, it turns out that you can work with it and you don't have to do that step. And so I'm working with Dr. Jenks' manual. It's about 100 pages, and I'm applying my experience to it. And essentially, I've already made some I've figured some stuff out already that is going to improve the process dramatically. And essentially, his method currently, what it does is involves 5-gallon buckets, and you soak this root bark in it with a dilute acid, and you strain it out and stir it, and strain it into the next bucket, and you have 5 or 10 buckets, and it's this continuous process, and so very labor intensive. So I've been really working a lot on ways to automate that process. And anyway, I don't know. I think I've got it figured out. So like I said, I've already figured some stuff out that's going to change the nature of this extraction. And I'll just put it out there because this information is for everyone. I'm going to release it. I'm going to benefit enough from it just by getting it out there and changing the world and stuff like that. So the deal is currently, the manual for extracting voacangine has a step where you do this dilute acid pull, and then you freebase it, which precipitates the solids, and then you filter that out and collect it. And that's the solid VTA, or voacangine total alkaloid extract. Now, Dr. Jenks suggested it in his book about potentially skipping that step and pulling directly into your nonpolar phase without moving into a solid intermediary. This will make sense to the chemist, but I just want to throw it out there. The problem with that is with any amount of bark, your vinegar, your tea, or a hydrochloric, whatever phase you want to use tea for my version of it. If you want to do a continuous extraction, if you want to pull if you want to pull a non-polar phase from your polar phase, well, the problem is if you're doing kilos of bark, your non-polar phase is huge. You end up with piles and piles of tea, gallons. You have 50 gallons of tea, and that's why you want to freebase it first. Is because you end up with a small amount of material, and then you dissolve that and do your chemistry with that. But long story short is I've got a design for a continuous multi-phase extraction system that I've been playing with for weeks now, and it's based off of other things that I've done successfully in the past, and I'm very confident it will work. So that's what I'm working on. So throwing that out there. I'm really excited about this, and I've got to ask if anybody can support. I'm doing what I can on my own, but essentially what I have is a design for a machine that would make the extraction of voacangine dramatically easier and more efficient. That in itself. So then the idea in the future is to go empower people in Africa and Gabon close to Vocanga africana farms, teach them how to do these initial steps. So you get voacangine, and you empower various people to make voacangine. That in itself will bring the cost of Ibogaine treatments down dramatically, and that's step one. So there's a multi-faceted, nuanced approach. There's more of a supply, the cost will go down, and there's more of it, and more awareness. And then there's other people approaching it from the legal angles and trying to get it decriminalized in this country, legalized, because it's if you do any research on Ibogaine and then you look at the definition of what Schedule 1 is, then you just realize that it's actually a crime against humanity, that Ibogaine is Schedule 1. That is the truth. It does not have a high potential for abuse. Hardly anyone wants to do it twice in their life. Um, and it definitely has medical benefits. So come on, like do the research. And anyway, so we're doing research over here. I'm working with a group of people. I've got kilos of Vocanga africana to experiment with. I've got a lot of supplies, but I could still absolutely use some support. So if anybody wants to contribute anything, I'll include a link at the end of this video. But even if not, be aware of it. Ibogaine is freaking amazing, and it's going to do some amazing things also. It actually goes much beyond the opioid dependency issue. But the opioid dependency issue is just the clearest example of what is going on, essentially. The clearest example of a benefit from this substance. I mean, you can literally just, someone 10 years on heroin takes one dose of Ibogaine, the next day they have absolutely zero withdrawal symptoms, and the part of their brain that was addicted to heroin or whatever is no longer addicted to heroin. Now, you again, like I said, you need some basic support afterwards, because some frequently that a month or 2 months later, it's not that you're immune. If all your friends and your family are trying to offer it to you or whatever, then people do relapse in that sense. So it's part of a. But for people that the big problem is the sickness and the dependency, it's so hard. This can absolutely be a new lease on life. It absolutely resets that dependency. However, or also, it has many other benefits to society that we haven't even begun to explore. It's actually really incredible stuff, and a lot of psychedelic therapies are interesting. MDMA seems really useful for PTSD, and mushrooms seem really useful for potentially depression or fear of life, end of life issues and stuff like that. Ibogaine is great for opioid issues. Really, we're going to explore and find out a lot more about these things, because it's much more complex than that. Just leaving your body for a little while, giving everything a chance to reset, just becoming pure consciousness, whatever it is. I don't know how it works. Ibogaine is chemically incredible stuff, but I do know what we have to do. We have to simplify the method for producing Ibogaine much more cheaply, because that will liberate the Tabernacle Iboga for the Bwiti tribes, and then the rest of the world will have access to more and more Ibogaine, which means that, if someone does slip into an opioid dependency, they break their ankle, they're addicted to some sort of opioid, hydrocodone or something, they get a little too deep and they get a problem, which does happen, they at least have a way out. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. We're doing it. Um, I really love to say, this certain thing that's not appropriate to say now, but let me just say, screw heroin. All right. Anyway, peace.